When you're working with functions, inputs and outputs, you will start to see that the output of a function depends on whatever you put in for the input. Here's a real quick example. We have the amount paid for a purchase and how many shoes were purchased. Which one depends on the other? Well, the amount paid depends on the number of shoes that you purchased. If you purchase more shoes, then it will cause your amount paid to go up. If you purchase fewer shoes, it will cause the amount paid to go down. So this actually introduces a word called dependent. And the counter to dependent is independent. So if we were to use those variables or those words for these two variables, the amount of shoes purchased would be our independent variable. And the amount paid would then be our dependent variable. Again, because the amount paid depends on the number of shoes purchased. When you're setting up an equation for a function, you will choose your independent and dependent variables based on this relationship. Independent variables are the x variable. So when you have chosen which is your independent variable, you will call that x, and your dependent variable will be y. If we go back to our table of values that we saw earlier, you'll notice that xy looks like this, where our x value will show us our y value. So we usually read it from left to right, where we have our input, and that gives us our output. So our relationship is shown in that table of values. We now just have different words for this. This is our independent, and this is our dependent variables. Those work nicely with stories. So let's take a look at a story problem over here. We have an equation. It says that this function given by this equation, y equals 25x plus 100, represents your monthly rent in dollars when you pay X days late. So if you are late by a few days, you're going to end up paying more. If you're late or if you're on time, you'll end up paying less. So these variables right here, y and x, the way that they're chosen, show us our independent and dependent variable, which one depends on the other. So that's our first question. We need to identify the independent and dependent variables. Well, independent is our x value. So the days late right here is our x value. That is our independent variable. Our y, which is our monthly rent, and it's in dollars, that is our dependent variable. Now let's stop and read this and see if it makes sense. Our monthly rent is our dependent variable, so our monthly rent depends on how many days late we pay it. That makes sense, because if we pay more days late, our rent is going to go up. If we are on time or fewer days late, our rent will be lower. The next question is about domain and range. Our domain is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 0, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days late. And remember, this is our x values with our domain. Our question is, what is the range? So we're going to plug those x values into here, and we're going to find our y values that go along with that. Let's make a table of values. We have our x and our y, and our equation is y equals 25x plus 100. Our possible x values were 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's plug each one of these in and get our y value that goes along with it. So 0 in for x would give us 25 times 0, which is 0 plus 100. That would mean y equals 100. So that's our first value. If we put 1 in for x, that's 25 times 1, which gives us 25, plus 100. So our y would equal 125 in this case. If we plug our 2 in for x right here, that gives us 25 times 2, or 50, plus 100. So that would be 150. If we plug our 3 in, that gives us 25 times 3, which is 75, plus 100. That would give us 175. If we plug our 4 in, that would give us 25 times 4, which is 100, plus another 100, which would be 200. And if we plug a 5 in, that would give us 25 times 5, which is 125 plus the 100 gives us 225. So our range, we now know, is 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, and 225.